Today, there are approximately 65 million people who are displaced around the world, of which over 20 million are refugees. We are currently in a Rohingya refugee settlement in Bangladesh. In this main settlement, there are over 600,000 Rohingyas living here. Imagine building a city for over 600,000 people in less than 6 months. We are in a state of emergency. I'm an architect. I advise on shelter design and site planning, mapping out where to put the shelters, where to put the emergency latrines, roads, footpaths, bridges, access. It is an exercise in town planning. The Rohingya, they are Muslim, and so it's quite important to try to understand as much as possible what their cultural preferences are. For example, when it comes to toilet design, it is very important that they do not face Mecca, otherwise they will not be used. We had an enormous plethora of various different challenges when it came to site planning and site development. The land allocated to the Rohingya settlement expansion was very undulating, full of flood-prone areas, slopes that are at risk of landslide. And so this obviously was a huge challenge when it came to stabilisation and development of infrastructure and construction of housing and buildings. The nature of the way the settlement spontaneously grew at an enormous rate last year with the influx, we were not able to control exactly where people built their shelters. So we've had to subsequently assist with the relocations of households from critically at-risk areas to safer, more stable, higher ground. In addition to that, the risk of overcrowding, the actual overall limitations in the amount of land that was allocated. I am very nervous about the monsoon season. The numbers of households that could be at risk of landslide and flooding, these numbers are very high. We are doing everything that we can to prepare as best as possible. What we were able to do with software was to model the potential watershed analysis and what the impact would be of a heavy inundation on the topography where the settlement is. Due to the epic undulations and the lack of flat area to work with, we were actually able to get government approval to bring in some heavy machinery and do some fairly substantial earthworks, cutting and filling, moving the landscape so that we could have bigger tracts of land that were much flatter and safer to build on. That had to be done with technology, otherwise it would have taken much, much longer. In this particular area of Kutupalong, which is just south of Cox's Bazar, it's right next to a nature reserve and also the home of one of the most endangered species of Asian elephants. There are currently less than 300 in total, and their migratory paths of movement actually cut through the settlement. We received CAD files of the elephant tracks, and they always use the same pathways every year for their migration patterns. So we were able to overlay these paths on top of the site plans, and that was incredibly useful because then we could see the exact areas that are at high risk. It's been such a privilege to work with UNHCR in these recent years because I really think that the access to technology and how we use the tools has progressed in leaps and bounds. I think that it's been both internally and externally quite an advocacy tool because the level of professional and clear plans, diagrams, technical drawings, bills of quantities, analysis, mapping that we have been able to generate has given further proof to the importance of having the shelter and site planning unit in the first place. Architects, designers actually have a role to play in a humanitarian crisis. Shelter is the tangible, physical core component of protection. And shelter doesn't just come out of thin air. You need people with qualifications and skills to be able to produce the designs and the site planning behind that. I think the greatest reward is always when you see joy and happiness and relief on people's faces after you've helped them.